Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Welcome to another episode of the Work From Home Show. This is your host, Adam Schrader, along with Naresh Vissa. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to air an interview that Naresh had on the show, The Entrepreneur Way. This was a while back, and sometimes, folks, predictions can take a while to come true. So, Naresh's prediction finally came true. So we're going to bring it to you here today. This is Naresh joining The Entrepreneur Way to talk about the digital marketplace.
Regardless of what your business is, you can be a doctor starting your own practice. You can be an accountant setting up shop, your own tax advising shop, or whatever CPA type of company you want to start. But I think having an understanding of the digital marketplace is the first step in starting your business.
This is The Entrepreneur Way with Neil Ball. Unlocking the secrets of successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter at Neil D. Ball. Napoleon Hill said the power of the mastermind is the driving force. To discover how you can unlock the potential in your business using the power of a mastermind, go to mastermindunlimited.com. And now, here is your host, Neil Ball.
Hello everybody, Neil Ball here. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Entrepreneur Way. The Entrepreneur Way is about the entrepreneur's journey, the vision, the mindset, the commitment, the sacrifice, failures and successes. I am so excited to bring you our special guest today, Naresh Vissa. But before I do, I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia to think about. Clifton Federman said, I tried to use the questions and answers as an armature on which to build a sculpture of genuine conversation. The Entrepreneur Way asks the questions so we all get the insights, inspiration and ideas to apply in our businesses. Naresh, welcome to the show. Are you ready to share your version of the Entrepreneur Way with us?
Thanks so much, Neil. It's a pleasure to be on, and I'm ready.
Great. Naresh Vissa is an author of a #1 best-selling book, 50 Shades of Marketing, Whip Your Business into Shape and Dominate Your Competition. And he is also the author of the #1 best-selling book, Podcastnomics, the book of podcasting to make you millions. Naresh is the founder and CEO of Krish Media and Marketing, a full-service online digital media and marketing consultancy and agency. And Naresh has also been featured in US Today, Yahoo, Bloomberg, MSNBC, Huffington Post, Business Week, MSN Money, Business Insider, India Today, Hindustan Times, and other domestic and international media outlets. Naresh, can you please provide us with some more insights into your business and personal life to allow us to get to know more about what you do and who you are?
Absolutely, Neil. So I started, or I should say, I grew up in a family that really, really valued education. So education always came first over anything else, whether it was sports, athletics, extracurriculars, business, even making money. Education kind of trumped all. And so the idea was to get as good an education as possible, continue with graduate studies, and get a good job at a company, and then stay with that company, have a nice stable salary, and have a family, and live happily ever after. Mm-hmm. And that's really the norm with a majority of people in developing nations and also in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Now, I did kind of honor most of that recipe. I stayed in school. I went on to get a master's degree. But at the same time, what I did was I started my first business when I was an undergraduate student in college. And it was a consulting services-based business where back then radio was still very prevalent. Podcasting wasn't as big as it is today. So I was doing a lot of radio work for different financial radio stations and radio shows around the United States of America. CNN Radio ended up becoming one of my clients, and I worked with just a bunch of different shows. Mm-hmm. But as I said, I did this on the side while I was still in school. So I never dropped out of school. I never compromised my studies. I went on to get a master's degree. And because of my experience, I was hired by probably the largest and most successful private and independent financial marketing and financial publishing company in the world. They're probably top 3 in the world. Mm-hmm. So getting that work experience, learning about the online and digital industries, which is still fairly new. I talked about terrestrial radio before, which is now near dead. But getting that online and digital experience, which is now where business and the economy is heading, that gave me the tools, it gave me the experience to set up my own legitimate, long-lasting business. So I left that company after about a year and a half of starting a division for them, started Krish Media and Marketing, which you mentioned in the introduction, mm-hmm. and then I've started a couple of startups, or I should say several startups, since then as well with different investors and business partners. Many of them have failed and are no longer in business. One of them I sold my equity stake in, mm-hmm. and one of them, which is called Moneyball Economics, we just launched about 2 months ago, and that's doing extremely well. It's a financial publisher, an investment publisher that uses big data analysis to forecast economic data and also individual publicly traded companies. Mm-hmm. So that's my kind of professional background in a nutshell, as well as a little glimpse into how I grew up and how I was raised and my personal background.
So just one thing, right now, how do you actually make money from what you do?
So we have Krish Media and Marketing, which is my digital consultancy and agency. Mm-hmm. We work with a variety of businesses, existing businesses and companies. Initially, we were working just with the financial industry. We were working with investment publishers, banks, brokerages, broker-dealers, hedge funds, real estate firms. And what we were doing is helping these businesses gain more of a digital presence so that they could accomplish 2 things. Number one, cut costs really through marketing and outsourcement. So to cut costs. And number 2, to convert more sales. So we offer services such as outsourcement, recruiting, and then more digital marketing type of services like social media management, affiliate marketing, pay-per-click, Google AdWords, social media marketing, copywriting, etc. So a full list of what we do is available at krishmediamarketing.com. Mm-hmm. And we also do podcast production, book publishing, and really, if anything's digital, we have solutions for it. Mm-hmm. We have about 15 to 20 contractors worldwide. These people are designers, web developers, copywriters, etc. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we offer a variety of services. Now, Moneyball Economics, the business model there is, as I mentioned earlier, we are a financial and economic research company. We sell our research to the public, so people can buy our trading advisory. That's what it is. They can buy our trading advisory at a yearly subscription of $99 at themoneyballtrader.com. And it's, as I mentioned, $99 a year to subscribe. And every week they receive 2 to 3 trading alerts based on heavy big data analysis. We tell people exactly where they should put their money in the stock market for the coming 5 to 10 business days. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the business model behind Moneyball Economics.
Okay, thanks for that. And can you just talk a little bit about your books? Because you've got a couple of books there. I mean, you've got Podcastnomics, which is one of your books. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Podcastnomics was my first best-selling book, and it is a book all about podcasting. It's really a primer on podcasting, from what a podcast is, the history of podcasting, to how you can get started podcasting, the type of equipment you need, the software you need to get started, and then most importantly, how you can market and monetize, make money off your podcast. When I mentioned I was recruited by the largest private financial publisher and marketing company in the world. I actually was recruited to start up their online podcasting network and to manage their digital media presence and strategy. So what we were able to accomplish was we were able to start a 7-figure podcasting network through 3 primary revenue drivers. The first revenue driver was selling the existing product. So the company was already a company that had several good products and was making a good amount of money off the products. And we used the podcast as almost a lead generator to sell listeners the existing products. That's the best way to make money off the podcast, to sell an existing product to your listeners. The second way we monetize off that division was, of course, advertising, which is the kind of traditional media method of monetization. Now, advertising is a little tricky because 21st century advertising is a lot more advanced. We know now in the 21st century, when we advertise, we can calculate a return on investment. We can track how many people view it, how many people convert, how many people bounce. We know exactly what's going on. Whereas in the 20th century, it was much harder to track that data. If you were advertising in the newspaper or on radio, it was much more difficult because there was no internet, there were no websites, and so it made it difficult to track all that data. The third way that we monetize was through premium content. So this is content that we charged for on a subscription level. So of course we had the free content, which is put out through iTunes and the RSS and the website. But then we came out with special subscription content that kind of had secrets. And again, this was a financial company, so I guess you can say investing secrets, financial secrets. And so it was a subscription, a monthly subscription that subscribers paid to receive. So that network has gone on and made a lot of money. If you're familiar with James Altucher, he now is on that network, and they got several other people on that network. But I moved on and have since managed, as I mentioned, probably more than 35 different podcasts over the past 2 years, the past 7 years. Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah, okay. And you've also written another book, which obviously I talked about at the beginning, 50 Shades of Marketing, which has the introduction with Philip Kotler in it. So can you just tell us a little bit about that book as well?
The genesis of 50 Shades of Marketing, the subtitle is Whip Your Business into Shape and Dominate Your Competition. Yeah. The genesis came about because I realized when I went out on my own that the traditional way, that the traditional corporatism is becoming obsolete. The need for office space, especially when it comes to white collar type of work, the need for office space, the need for, meetings, so many things that are done in an office, in my opinion, and I don't even think it's an opinion, it's really just becoming a fact, but it's becoming very, very obsolete. And when I started Krish Media and Marketing, I was working with all sorts of corporations, companies that had offices and that had bureaucracies and were very stringent on, showing up to the office on time and wearing a dress code and doing all these things. And what I realized was a lot of these companies were missing the big picture, the important thing of the product or service that is being sold. That's really what's most important, not whether an employee is in his seat at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I started butting heads with several of my clients who were very, very resistant to the online and digital world. They were very resistant to market online, to even have a simple website. They just thought it was irrelevant. They thought, the online and digital world is for young people who don't have any money and won't spend anything on it. They won't spend anything. And that's just the furthest thing from the truth. That was the genesis of 50 Shades of Marketing, because I wanted to write really, again, another primer on the online and digital marketplace. And I wanted to lay out strategies and principles for business owners, entrepreneurs, marketers of all type. I wanted to lay out all those things for them so that they could apply them to their own situations, to their own businesses.
Okay, thank you for that. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
It's every day is a different day. Every month is a new month. And to be an entrepreneur, it's definitely a roller coaster type of ride. You have some awesome months where you get really big checks or deposits coming into your bank account, but then you have some really, really crappy months where you have no idea if you'll even be able to make enough money for rent. So it's definitely a roller coaster of a ride. I enjoy what I do because publishing and media has really been my interest and my passion since I was a kid. Now, the subject matters have altered. So when I was a kid, I didn't care at all about finance or economics or any of that stuff. But I still did care a lot about media and news and publishing and things like that. So being able to work every day with my business partners, my investors, my clients, and solving their problems and seeing the results, seeing them increase their sales, make more money, growing a business from scratch, building it and growing it from scratch, from 0 subscribers to 50 to 100 to 1,000. It's really an awesome thing to see, and it's incredible experience. I also, the most important kind of characteristic of being an entrepreneur, especially a digital one, is that I have a lot of control. I wouldn't say I have full control, but I have a lot of control and freedom in my life. So to give you an example, I live at home, I work at home, I do everything at home. My meetings are at home. I'm talking to you right now on Skype from home. I live on a beach in Tampa Bay, Florida. The beach has Wi-Fi. I do lots of work from here. I write my books from here. There's just an incredible amount of freedom. I make my own schedule. I can sleep in if I want. I can go out at night and come home late if I want. As long as I get my work done and I'm on top of my stuff. So that freedom and that control that I have over the people who work for me, over my businesses, it's really a great feeling. But I did mention you never really have full control though. It's almost impossible to have full control. And so that's what makes the journey a roller coaster type of ride.
So what is it that drives you?
Again, I think it comes back to the freedom and control. I'm not a very good employee. I struggle a lot with bureaucracy. I struggle a lot with being told what to do. And so the autonomy that I have over my work, that's what kind of drives me, because almost everything that I do now, professionally, socially, personally, almost everything is something that I want to do. It's something that I'd be doing anyway, whether I was getting paid for it or not. So that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what really gets me going. It's not a job. I tell most of my friends I don't have a real job. I do a lot of different things, but I don't have a real job.
I've heard other people say that, and it's something that I can relate to very much. So how do you relax when you're not working in your business, or you're not writing books and not relaxing on the beach, working in your business, or however you do it?
Well, I'm a very big proponent of mental, spiritual, and this was really taken from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Yeah. But I'm a big proponent of having mental health, spiritual health, physical health, and emotional health. So I've been focusing a lot over the past couple of years on mental health, meaning exercising the brain, because after people are done with school, and they start working a job, even though they're working the job, the brain might actually start to atrophy. And when you're in school, at least, you're always on your toes, studying for exams, learning concepts, going from class to class. It keeps the mind pretty sharp. So to mentally stay fit, I think it's very important to, at least what I do, I read a lot of books, not the news. I actually I don't actively read the news at all, but I read a lot of books and I watch a lot of kind of educational movies, documentaries, things like that. And then I also do a lot of writing. So not just writing books, business type of books, but I do some more self-transformations, personal improvement type of writing. And what that does is it exercises the mind tremendously. It leads to more ideas. It really gets you thinking, and it exercises the brain.
Yeah.
So that's mental health. The next thing would be physical health. I think it's incredibly important to stay physically in shape, not just for health reasons, but also because being physically active helps you mentally and spiritually and emotionally. So I spend about 3 to 4 days a week either working out or going for a run or playing tennis or playing basketball or playing beach volleyball. Being here in Florida, that's very popular. So I get a fairly good amount of exercise.
You said 3 to 4 days a week. Did you mean hours or days?
When I say days, I mean I mean 3 daes of the week. I probably won't do anything.
Right, I see what you're saying. So yeah,
right.
okay.
I'm not spending 24 hours a day doing these things for 3 or 4 days a week. Yeah. So I'll spend maybe 2 hours each during these 3 or 4 days playing these sports. So I'm not very good at any of them, but hey, it's good enough to hit a few balls or shoot some hoops and run around and get some exercise. It's definitely a huge stress reliever that keeps me focused on what I need to do, and also it takes me away from the stresses of being an entrepreneur. The other area is spirituality. I would consider myself to be fairly religious, relatively speaking. That's just relatively speaking, but spirituality is not about religion. I think 2 things: just giving thanks is a very big deal, and actually just one thing: just giving thanks. Yeah. You don't have to give thanks to a specific individual or imaginary person or maybe real person. Just being thankful is enough for spirituality, in my opinion, and doing that every day. Whether it's after you wake up or after, in my case, it's after I shower or before you go to sleep, being thankful for the things that you have, the day that you had. It's definitely a worthwhile experience that helps you stay grounded. Now, travel is very important when it comes to spirituality, because when you travel outside of your comfort zone, you're able to see the rest of the world. You're able to see other situations from a different perspective, and it gives you just a new light on what else is out there. So I definitely recommend that people travel for the experience, because in my opinion, experiences are way more valuable than anything tangible, than anything material. And the last thing that I mentioned is emotional health. And all that is being around people who you like. I mentioned earlier that now I'm in a situation where I rarely do things that I don't want to do. I'm trying to almost exclusively do things that I do want to do. And when it comes to emotional health, it means being around people who you want to be around, not being around people who are going to bring you down or hurt you in any way or anything like that. So those 4 areas, I started working on them about 2.5 years ago, and they've kind of become a part of how I live my own daily life as an entrepreneur.
Can we talk about entrepreneurial role models? Do you have any?
There are several role models. One of my, it's not a specific person, but I really enjoy the immigrant story, because here in the United States, which is really a nation of immigrants, there are so many amazing stories of people who came to this country without, I mean, you hear it all the time. People came to this country with $20 in their pocket. They didn't know anybody. They started a business, and years later they found it. They made money, they got by, and they did very well. In my case, in my own family, it was a little different. One thing that my father had when he came to this country was a very strong education that he got in India from one of the best colleges in India. And he came to the United States to pursue his higher education. So even though he came here with next to nothing in his pocket, he had the education next to him. He had the education stood by him, and that's how he was able to get a job, and then years after that start his own company, and then started another company. So he's definitely a role model of mine. But there are really, it's just the immigrant story of people coming here not knowing. Some of them didn't even know how to speak English, and being able to succeed in this country and to give back. It's just very, very phenomenal.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's the same here, actually. But Brian Tracy says if you want to be successful, you've got to want it like an immigrant. I think that's one of the things he says. I don't know if you've heard that.
I have heard it. I've read some of Brian Tracy's books. He's come out with a lot of good ones, and I think I read that somewhere. It might have been in a blog.
Yeah, I might have misquoted that slightly, but I'm sure it was something like that. But yeah. Okay, can we talk about the time before you were an entrepreneur? What, can you talk about what difficulties you had to overcome when you started your business?
So the beginning of my entrepreneurial career was actually the easy part. Things got hard, I would say, a year into my businesses. And the reason why things were smooth early on is because, I was in school when I started my first business. So I knew, it was a service business. So I knew if I don't have any clients or business coming my way, I can always graduate and just get a job somewhere. So I didn't really face much pressure while I was in school doing my business thing. Now, when I completely went out on my own, I was done with school. I was no longer at a company. I was just 100% on my own. The transition was very simple, and getting started was much easier than I ever thought it would be. In fact, I was kind of shaking my head, like, I don't know why so many entrepreneurs say it's so hard and this and that. And it's largely because when I was working full time, I was running a business on the side. Yeah. So when I left the company, I was able to take my side business and make it full time. Okay. So as soon as I left my company, it's almost like I gave myself a 20% raise from what I was making at the company to what I was doing with Krish Media and Marketing. That was the first company. Now, the problems, however, arose about a year in. My first year was great. I thought this was too easy. I was living the dream in Maryland, not too far away from D.C., but the first problems came in because a year in, because my biggest client was in the precious metals industry. And if people follow anything about the precious metal space, they've tanked over the past 3 years. They've gone nothing but down, nowhere but down over the past 3 years or so. So anyway, the industry is facing a lot of, pretty much the entire commodity space right now is still experiencing a lot of cuts. I lost my biggest client. And then a few months after that, my biggest client, someone else, we got into a lawsuit. I don't know how things are in Europe or in Britain, but in America, lawsuits are very common. It was my first big lawsuit. I was in really small lawsuits before, but this one was a 6-figure lawsuit. We had lawyers involved, bullying each other, people saying all sorts of things about me saying all sorts of things about them threatening me with all sorts of things. And that actually derailed a lot of my business. Just mentally and emotionally, I was out of it for months because I had no idea if this thing was ever going to get settled, if it went to court. I would have to spend a lot of money on my lawyers, traveling because my client was located across the country. It was just a state of, I don't want to say purgatory, but intense pressure. And it was my first experience being a part of something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, the experience was very worthwhile. When it was all said and done, we settled, and it's almost like I got a mini law degree after going through that experience. And it taught me a lot about the legal profession and really the amount of disruption that it's going to face over the next decade or two. The legal profession here in the United States has not necessarily faced much disruption, but it's coming. And I learned that from my experience as well. Mm-hmm. So that's just an example of some of the difficulties that you face as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You'll never anticipate any of this stuff. I mentioned earlier, you have some great months, you have some terrible months. You just never know. You never know. But it takes a certain type of personality to go through with it and to, I guess, take that risk. And I don't want to call it a risk because, again, when I got started, I wasn't taking a risk because I started on the side while I was working full time. So.
Okay. And did you have any doubts that delayed you starting your business? I think you've touched on this already, so I think I know what you're going to say, but...
No, in my situation, I didn't necessarily have some doubts, but I mentioned earlier that I've shut down several startups.
Yeah.
And I did have pretty much every single startup that I shut down, I was very doubtful before I started it. It's just I was kind of convinced by either investors or partners, like, no, you got to do it. This is the next hot thing. Like, you're leaving money on the table. And I had my doubts, and I listened to the other people. I went through with them, and they ended up getting shut down. Mm-hmm. Now I've kind of learned my lesson to go with not necessarily my gut, but to go with the facts. And it's easy to get the facts and data now because of the digital world, because of the internet. Mm-hmm. But now the businesses that are still standing today are the ones that I believed in from day one. In fact, I was the one doing the convincing with partners or investors. So those are really the doubts that I've had when it comes to the startups that I work on.
And what mistakes did you make that slowed your journey?
I mentioned earlier about listening to other people and taking their word for things. I don't want to say that they're not trustworthy because they're not. They were just wrong. And it's very important to make mistakes because if you don't make the mistakes, then you're never going to learn. And being an entrepreneur is a learning experience. Always a learning. Even if you have 40 years of experience as an entrepreneur, the world is changing so much, and 20 years from now, the world's going to be completely different than what it is today. Just think about what the world was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So making mistakes is okay. The biggest mistakes that I've made, I think I've been fortunate in that I haven't made like huge blunders. I've lost a lot of money with dumb investments that I've made. And hey, you learn from those. I've wasted a lot of time on dumb kind of sweat equity that I've put into different projects, and you learn from those mistakes. But you just keep moving forward and learn from those mistakes. Now, I mentioned earlier, I read a lot of books and really specialty blogs, not news blogs, but like specialty type of blogs. And so I read a lot about other people's failures, a lot. I feel like every day I read something about someone else's failure. And you learn a lot by reading from other people's failures. So many of these books and interviews, and I'm sure you've brought people on your show, they talk about their successes. It's always all the good things that are happening, all the great things. But reading about other people's failures, well, at least it's helped me mitigate the chances of making the same mistakes that they made. Yeah,
okay. That's some great counterintuitive advice that you've given there. What are some of the things that you did before you started your business that would be helpful tips to some of the listeners who haven't yet taken the first step of the entrepreneur's way?
I think the first thing that people need to understand is that we now live in the 21st century digital economy. Mm-hmm. And so regardless of what your business is, you can be a doctor starting your own practice. You can be an accountant setting up shop, your own tax advising shop, or whatever CPA type of company you want to start. But I think having an understanding of the digital marketplace is the first step in starting your business, because everything is going digital. Everything. The way people shop, the way people conduct business, the way people communicate, relationships, currencies, they're going digital. And you need to understand the marketplace. You need to understand the opportunities that are in this digital marketplace, because if you don't, you'll be leaving money on the table. Mm-hmm. So I highly, highly recommend that people learn as much as they can about the opportunities that exist in the digital marketplace. My book, 50 Shades of Marketing, is a very good start. Mm-hmm. And then there are several other resources that will help you learn some more. But I think that's the first step. The second step is you have to have some sort of competitive advantage. In many cases, that competitive advantage could be living in a certain location. It could be expertise. It could be that you're an amazing cook at something. You make amazing food, or you're an expert on a certain subject matter. But you must have some kind of competitive advantage to get started. I think those two areas, understanding the digital marketplace and then having an expertise, if you have those two down solid, then the third thing that you'll need is the contacts, which can be made. I mentioned earlier the immigrant story. Most of the immigrants who move to other countries, they don't know anyone when they get their businesses started, but they made their contacts. It takes time. It takes years to do that. It doesn't happen overnight. But the first two things are kind of the fundamentals. The first two areas I mentioned, those would be the fundamentals, and then the kind of networking aspect can come after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can we just move along in the journey of your entrepreneurial journey here and look at the actual when you set up your business? Do you think that culture is important from the beginning in a business?
I don't think so, because the culture is actually determined as the business evolves. Mm-hmm. It's the culture is going to take the personality of the founders always. Mm-hmm. That's what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But when you're first getting started, it's really just going to be the founder and his partners. Mm-hmm. So there's not much of a culture. And in the digital marketplace, the culture isn't as defined, because rather the culture is, I would say, almost a bit fragmented or disconnected, which I found to be even more efficient than having a set Bible. I know some companies, they publish like culture books, mm-hmm. like 100-page culture books. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. Yeah. I don't think that's the best way. I brought up earlier corporatism and kind of the bureaucracies that come with it. I think that's archaic. That's an archaic way of running a business, particularly in the digital age where you can outsource so much and get things done much more quickly with less bureaucracy, less hierarchy. So I'm not a huge fan of corporate cultures. I think decades from now, that entire profession and industry is going to be extinct.
Mm. Do you know, I mean, I'm just listening to what you're saying there, and I just wonder what you think here. If you have a very big business, though, you have to define something in it. Otherwise, it's very difficult to maintain consistency of the service that you deliver, do you not think?
Yeah, so again, the culture, and this happens all the time. You hear it all. If you talk to a corporate drone, he'll tell you how many times a company that he or she's been working for 30, 40 years has changed culture. And so I just feel like defining a set culture it's very difficult to make it long lasting because companies are always churning out the CEOs are shuffling in and out, regardless of how big the company is. So an example, two good recent examples would be Apple and Microsoft. Microsoft had a certain culture in the 80s when Bill Gates founded it, and it really took the personality was based off him. They've had a couple of CEOs since then, and the culture, if you just type in Microsoft culture, there are tons of articles that you can probably read about the changing of culture, how the changing of culture has led to the stock price's demise, and now Bill Gates is back with Microsoft as chairman of the board to get things back on track. So the point I'm trying to make is you can define your culture. You can, as a CEO, you can define your culture and come out with your booklet and make people read it and all that. But I just don't think it's ever going to be long lasting. And the same thing with Apple. Steve Jobs, there was a certain culture that he didn't necessarily implement. It took the personality of him. He was a very strange fellow. Mm-hmm. And then when he passed away, the new CEO came in and the culture has changed quite a bit since he's left. The innovation has changed since he's left. Mm-hmm. So the point I'm trying to make is, yes, there will always be a culture. Even if you don't define the culture will develop. Mm-hmm. It will happen. That's just the case. It's the law of human nature. But I'm not a fan of laying out the culture in a formal constitution and making people act a certain way and do certain things and all that. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should be worrying about that too much as an entrepreneur, especially when you're just getting started.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that if you'd known it when you started out would have helped you to shortcut the learning curve?
I actually would have gotten involved in business more in entrepreneurship more when I was younger. So even going back to high school, if I got that experience, I think I would have shortened the learning curve. Mm-hmm. In addition, I was very, very clueless about, and again, it's because the digital economy is still growing. But when I got started, I didn't know anything about online marketing, digital marketing, contractors, things like that. Now, outsourcing and these websites like Upwork.com, Fiverr.com, people who I've met overseas, who I've met through message boards and forums, having all these contacts and connections who I found digitally has really streamlined my business processes. It's cut costs. Mm-hmm. It's cut the cost of doing business. It's cut the cost of starting business tremendously. And 5 years ago, I didn't know any of this stuff, at all. Mm-hmm. So again, it's a mix of not getting the experience, but it's also because the digital economy and the digital marketplace wasn't as developed as it is today.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. And how much, just going back to something we've touched on already, but how much does gut feeling influence your decisions in your business?
I'm actually not a fan of the gut. Okay. I've read a lot of, you read all sorts of things of people saying, follow your gut, follow your gut. So I mentioned earlier my startup is called Moneyball Economics. And really what we do is we publish research that is completely data-driven, mm-hmm. whereas 99% of our competitors, of the other financial research companies, financial advisories, they publish research that is based on the gut. Yeah. And so I used to completely go with my gut, mm-hmm. and this was years ago, just a couple of years ago. And I just realized that making data-driven decisions, making more informed decisions, makes more practical sense than going with your gut. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a fan of the gut. If you have a chance to somehow get access to information, expertise, knowledge, data on decisions that you're making. Mm-hmm. trust that over your gut.
Interesting that you say that, because I was just thinking back to what you said earlier about some of your startups that didn't work, and you did actually say at that point that your gut had told you that they didn't feel right at the time. So then maybe you need to tune your gut a little bit here.
I don't think I said my gut didn't support, or my gut told me not to do that. Right. I think instead what I said was I wasn't.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I wasn't too interested in them, largely because the data, and I didn't mention this earlier, but the data that I did have access to was telling me otherwise. I had people on one year telling me this is going to be the next big thing, but then in the other year, I actually had Google Trends, Google Analytics showing that this is a bubble, or that this isn't going anywhere right now until there's some kind of significant enhancement or regulation passed. This isn't going anywhere. But I went with the other year simply because I had these other people convincing me, and I kind of just didn't want to let them down.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. Life is made of constant change, whether we like it or not. In fact, some people say that the only constant is change. Naresh, how do you keep up with change?
That's a very good question, and this was kind of ingrained in me very early on, before I even became an entrepreneur. And I remember reading, it was actually the rapper Jay-Z who, and I'm sure someone said it before him, but he said that as a human being, because of the amount of change that we face, regardless of where we live, how we grew up, we're going to face change. And so he said, you need to learn how to become water, because when you're water, you're always changing containers, you're always changing shape. But when someone drinks you still taste the same. Yeah. So I think it's important that people, they need to develop those characteristics, the malleability that water has. They need to develop those, because it'll help reduce your stress levels. It'll help you manage multiple issues and projects at one time, personal and professional. So that's the only thing I would say. It's to don't get too high during the highs, don't get too lows during the lows, don't get angry or whatever about small things, dumb things. Just be water and live life to the fullest.
So don't be steam.
Don't what?
Don't be steam.
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us what your favourite books are on, or your favourite book is on entrepreneurialism, business, personal development, leadership, or motivation? And can you tell us why you have chosen it?
Well, I explained it earlier, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Yeah. That is, I think, the best book for anyone. So yes, it's good for business, but it's also great for self-help and self-improvement. The other book it's a religious text. It's an ancient Hindu scripture called the Bhagavad Gita. Now, even though it's considered a religious text, it's really a philosophical text.
How do you spell that?
Say that again?
How do you spell that?
It's BHAGAVAD space GITA. Okay. And that's considered it's equivalent. The Muslims have the Quran, the Christians have the Bible, Jews have the Torah. This is considered the official book of Hinduism, and it's a philosophical text. And a lot of the principles in that text I've applied to my own life. So a lot of things that I've said in this interview, for example, they've kind of become ingrained in me because I read them in the Gita years ago.
Okay, thanks for that. everyone, when you have a busy life, listening to audiobooks is a great way to expand your knowledge in the time when you may be doing other things, such as driving your car or when you are at the gym. We have a special offer for you of a free audiobook of your choosing. To choose your free audiobook, go to www.freeaudiobookoffer.com. As long as you've not already signed up, then you will qualify. Now, Naresh, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk about the future a little bit. So what one thing would you do with your business if you knew that you could not fail?
I would want to start more businesses. So this is somewhat of a loaded question, but I believe that if you look at all these successful business people in really who you might know, one common thread that you'll notice among almost all of them is they own real estate. They own property. So I don't own any property yet. I don't own any real estate yet, but it's an area that I want to get into. Living is a necessity. Living in shelter is a necessity. So there's always going to be demand for residential real estate. I brought up earlier the digital economy, which is going to disrupt the commercial real estate space, and it already has. But having a home to live in, to bathe in, to eat dinner, a table to eat dinner on, that's a necessity that is going to stay. You can't digitize that. You can't digitize that. It's going to stay forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I knew that my businesses would never fail, I would definitely want to use a lot of the money that I make from them to start a residential real estate business. And I would want to continue to grow my businesses. My goal is not to start businesses and sell my stakes or sell the businesses. I want to grow them. I'm very, very aggressive in my tactics and my growth strategy. I want to grow them. I want to hire people. I want people overseas. I want them to become almost like a machine, so that I want them to become so automated and so like a machine, so that I can take a step back and just let them run on their own.
Okay, thanks for that. And what skill, if you were excellent at it, would help you the most to double your business?
That's I think this goes back to online marketing and understanding the digital marketplace. So the better you can become at understanding this, the more success you're going to have in your business. So of course, in my business, which is completely digitally oriented, but even a physical business like a restaurant or a bar or a club, if you understand that, I think it'll just make you extremely, extremely successful.
And in 5 years from now, if a well-known business publication was publishing an article on your business after talking to your customers and suppliers, what would you like it to say?
Well, I can't really answer that question, because the customers and suppliers and partners and all that, they could say whatever they want about us. All I can say is I hope it's good stuff. I hope the work that I do, I try to be as honest as I can. I try to be as open and transparent as I can when dealing with our clients, vendors, affiliates, partners, investors. I can control the things that are under my watch, but what other people think about me or my business, that's completely up to them and their opinion.
Yeah, I understand that. I think the idea of that question was that you paint a picture of what you'd like them to say. So to some extent, I understand what you're saying, but obviously you drive your business with an intention of creating a certain level of happiness with your customers. So I was sort of trying to get that out of you there. Do you not think that's something that you'd want to do?
Yeah, well, that's I think that's the goal of every business owner.
Yeah.
I want to be successful. I want to treat the customers right. I want everyone to be happy. So that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. We're now at the part of the show where you share your 3 golden nuggets with us. So, Naresh, what is your favourite quote and how have you applied it?
So part of being an entrepreneur, we talked about earlier, the ups and downs that you face. And there are times when you are going through hell. And I remember there were strings of months where I was worried about not being able to pay rent. I was worried about shutting down my business and being forced to move somewhere or sell my car or sell other assets that I had. So I think it was Churchill. You might have heard this quote that Churchill said during the 40s, I think. He said, if you're going through hell, keep going. So there's a tendency that when people are facing the tough times, they can just give up, or they say, this is not for me, I'm walking away. But when you're going through hell, which is very different from if your business is failing and it has no future, that's very different from when you're going through hell.
Yeah.
So when you're going through hell, keep going, I think is almost a mantra that business owners should definitely write down somewhere. Mm-hmm. They should frame it and keep looking back at it during the ups, during the highs and the lows.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I haven't heard of that before. And do you have any favorite online resources you can share with us?
When you say online resources, do you mean specifically for like entrepreneurship or business, or? Yeah,
just things that you find particularly useful. So,
yeah, well, I subscribe to several. Actually, no, I don't anymore. But I read. Not necessarily online, but I mentioned earlier you can get the books online. But I read a lot of business type of books, mm-hmm. self-help, self-improvement type of books. So I do recommend. Let me just name a few books mm-hmm. for entrepreneurs. The first book is called The Long Tail, and it's by, his name's slipping my mind, but it's called The Long Tail. It was published in 2008, I want to say. So it's a little older book, mm-hmm. but the principles are timeless because the author's name is Chris Anderson. I just remembered. But the principles are timeless because it does a great job of laying out the 21st century way of doing business. And the 21st century way of doing business is not just digital, but it's also following this long tail. Not if you look at a bell curve, for example, mm-hmm. A bell curve will curve up and then it will taper off. And the book talks about the portion that's tapered off, not that big kind of parabola that's on a graph. Instead, it's the tail. That's where the true value of your business is, mm-hmm. on that tail side. Mm-hmm. So I recommend all business owners read that. And then, of course, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then my book, 50 Shades of Marketing, Put mm-hmm. your business into shape and dominate your competition. Very beneficial resource. And in that book, there are more than 30 different resources on very specific digital commerce areas like affiliate marketing, copywriting, outsourcing, how to do all sorts of different things, publishing a book, podcasting. It lays out a ton of resources there. Okay. So I'd recommend that. And then I have my own newsletter too, nareshvisa.com. People can get on my mailing list, and I send out some tidbits and goodies for entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you for that. And what is your best advice to other entrepreneurs?
I think people should give entrepreneurship a shot.
Yeah.
I hear people complain a lot about their jobs and so at their office or at their company doing this. They hate their boss. I think people need to give entrepreneurship a shot because today we live in a great time. I have no idea how entrepreneurs like Bill Gates got started in the 80s before the internet and before all this technology. But today it's easier than ever to get started on a business. The cost, as I mentioned earlier, the cost of starting a business has gone down tremendously. And I think it's worth giving a shot on the side. If you're going to become an entrepreneur, get started on the side first. So you can continue to work your full-time job, but just do it on the side. You're going to have to give up some nights out at the pub or at the sports games or whatever it might be. But always start from the side. Don't quit your full-time job and then go out and start from scratch. I think that's the quickest way to fail.
Okay. Everyone, if you didn't manage to get a note of Naresh's favourite resource or his favourite book, you can find the links on Naresh's show notes page. Go to theentrepreneursway.com and search for Naresh, which is Naresh, or Naresh Visa, which is Nareshvissa in the search box. Naresh, is there anything else that you'd like to add about your business?
Neil, I think we covered everything that we can possibly cover about entrepreneurship, about Krish Media and marketing, Moneyball economics.
Okay.
If people want to learn more about any of my businesses, krishmediamarketing.com is our digital consultancy and agency. We work with businesses of all types. And then moneyballeconomics.com. We have free research that we publish to the public as well. So you can get on our newsletter, our mailing list to get our free research. And that's about it.
Okay, Naresh. Thank you for sharing such a huge amount of useful information with us. It really has been great hearing your opinions, and you've come up with some great ideas and really given us some insight into what the entrepreneur's mind thinks and does. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Neil. It's been a pleasure talking to you and great questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.